question. The Brazilian economy has surpassed expectations of growth, and it's expected to grow by 3.4% compared to 2.5%, which was forecast. To what do we owe this increased forecast, and how is the Brazilian government trying to stimulate the market so that there can be greater growth in the future? Before anything else, good afternoon, everyone, and I thank Adrian and everyone else. I want to compliment everybody, greet everybody. I'm not going to try to pronounce everyone's last name. I'm sorry, but I'm very happy to be here at the Atlantic Council to thank you and to speak a little bit about the challenges that Brazil faces in the Caribbean as well. Valentina's question is $1 million question because it's the question that we're asking ourselves in Brazil. I believe that in the last 15 years, the Brazilian economy has changed a great deal. Um, Coming from the interior of Brazil and having had the opportunity to study in Rio de Janeiro, master's degree in Sao Paulo, and have lived 10 years in the capital of Brazil. So, besides having gone from north to south of Brazil over the past 2 years, first as a candidate for president of the Republic, and then building our participatory planning throughout the last 4 years to until 2026, I should say, I dare say that not even Brazil understands the Brazil of today. We have various Brazils within Brazil today, but there's been a radical change in terms of the geo economy. Brazil has become like a center west of the United States. The agricultural frontier of Brazil has really gained traction, and it's sort of moving the Brazilian economy. But a lot of measures, Valentina, in microeconomy and structural reforms have occurred over the past 8 years. And I'm speaking as somebody who was in the Senate and who had the opportunity to vote for some of these changes, like the labor reforms, the Social Security reforms, the basic sanitation framework. So, and a many measures that made Brazil more secure judicially and also more stable in so many ways. But in terms of your first question, I would say that the positive expectations have a lot to do with the economic diversity of the country, not only in terms of agribusiness, but of these structural reforms, other reforms that are being that are underway. We're giving money to those that need money, the working class, the poor people, those who aren't used to savings. But this has generated industry and industrial growth, and thus
Ministra, a senhora
surpassing
tocou em
growth
dois temas que eu
expectations.
gostaria de
You
aprofundar. Eu
talked
vou
about
começar por
two,
um que
you
já
touched on
acabou de
two
mencionar, que
themes
são
that
as
I
reformas
wanted you to get more
estruturantes.
into.
O Brasil
You talked about
passou por
structural
algumas
reforms.
reformas
Brazil
econômicas
underwent
importantes nos
some
últimos tempos,
um,
tanto a reforma
important
tributária quanto a
reforms.
reforma da
The
Previdência são
tax reform and
essenciais para a
Social Security
sustentabilidade
reform, which are
econômica e
essential
fiscal do
for
Brasil.
fiscal
Quais as
sustainability in
expectativas em
Brazil. What are the
relação à nova
expectations in
fase de
terms of the new
implementação da reforma
phase of
tributária e
implementation
tendo em
of
vista o
tax
planejamento e o
reform
orçamento
um,
os quais a senhora
in
lidera no
view
Brasil,
of what you're
qual o real
dealing
impacto
with
que
in
se pode
Brazil? What are
esperar
going to be the
no
real
equilíbrio das
impacts of
contas
this
públicas
in
brasileiras
the
vistas
balance of public
essas
accounts
reformas?
in Brazil, given these reforms?
Eu luto por essa
I
reforma tributária desde que eu entrei na vida
struggle for
pública.
these
Nós estamos
changes
falando de algo em
since I
torno de
started
quase 30 anos.
my
De todas as
public
reformas, ela é
service.
a mãe
Of
de
all
todas
of
elas.
these
Nós temos um
reforms,
sistema
this would I
tributário,
would say is the mother
tínhamos
of
um
the
sistema
reforms.
tributário
We had a
caótico no
tax
Brasil,
system that was
com
chaotic in
inatividade
Brazil.
de
Um,
impostos, se
uh,
discutia até uma
we
possível bitributação,
debated
uma
all.
burocracia excessiva. Imagina
We
você
had
ter 5
excessive
mil leis
bureaucracy.
para serem
We had
analisadas para tomar uma
65
decisão se
laws to
você vai
be
abrir uma indústria ou
analyzed.
não. Isso tudo
to
acaba com a reforma
determine
tributária.
whether
Ela
you could
transforma
open a
5
business.
impostos em 2, é o
Now
nosso
we have
IVA,
5
só que
taxes that are
diferente de muitos
turning that
países,
are
o IVA é
becoming
dual.
just
Nós
2.
temos o IVA, que é o
We have
imposto em
the
nível
IVA,
federal, que
which
nós
is the
temos um
federal
sistema
tax,
federativo
a
diferente, por
federative
exemplo, do
system that's
americano,
different
e
from
nós
the
temos o IVA que
American system,
unifica
and we
o
have the
imposto,
IVA that unifies
estadual com o
the
municipal.
state and the
Esse
municipal
IVA vai
tax. This
permitir com que
IVA
os
is
produtos sejam
allows
tributados
that
no consumo,
products be
diminuindo
taxed at the
absurdamente
point
os
of
litigios
consumption,
administrativos
and
tributários,
this
fazendo com
eliminates a
que
lot of
a
bureaucracy
indústria tenha
and
ganho
allows
e ganho de
businesses
produtividade. Só para ter uma
to be
ideia,
more
eu até
productive.
anotei, porque a
So
reforma tributária
just so
sempre é a
you
pergunta
can
que se
have an
faz para mim.
idea, that
Aqui
this
tem
is the question that's
dados
always
que,
asked of
obviamente, são
me.
estimativas,
There's
que
data
somente a reforma
that
tributária, quando
points to
ela
the fact
começar a
that
vigorar no Brasil, ela já foi
when
aprovada por
this
emenda
kind of
constitucional, que é
reform
ainda
is
mais
implemented in
significativo,
Brazil,
ela tem condições de aumentar
has
em
the
pelo
ability
menos
to increase
0,8 o
in
PIB
zero
anual do
in
Brasil. Alguns
0.8
projetam que pode chegar a
the
1 ou 1,2
gross
a
national
partir de
product in Brazil,
2031, mas já a partir
and
de
much more
2027
as
ela
of
tem um
a couple
impacto
of
entre
years from
26 e
now.
27
So
de
it has a
poder
great
crescer
deal of impact in
0,8.
terms of
Em geração de
growth,
empregos, o
GNP
cálculo aqui
growth
é
in
médio,
Brazil,
nós estamos
and
falando de
and we're
aumento de
talking about
incremento de 7 a
uh,
12 milhões de empregos
great
formais sendo
6 to
garantidos
7
a
million
partir
more
dessas mesmas datas.
jobs to
Então é
be
isso, sem
generated
aumento da carga tributária,
through
neutralidade
these
tributária, com ganho
through
de
these
eficiência. Com
reforms
isso, os estados vão
through
arrecadar
greater
mais, a União
efficiencies,
vai arrecadar mais,
and
de novo,
the
por ganho de
federal
produtividade,
government
não
will
com aumento
also
da
garner
carga
more
tributária. Isso
through
é
these
extremamente
tax
significativo. Por
reforms.
fim,
This is very
nós estamos em
significant.
fase de regulamentação.
Finally,
Ainda
we're
ontem, o presidente do
also
Congresso Nacional Brasileiro
regulating
já fez um calendário
through
em que
the
entregará no máximo em 30
Congress,
dias para
and
a
within
Câmara,
30
para que a
days,
Câmara aprove em
the
dezembro
Chamber of
deste ano a
Deputies will approve
regulamentação
the
definitiva dessa
new
reforma tributária.
regulations,
Então,
the new
avançando
tax
com a
regulations.
implementação da reforma tributária e com impactos
And
significativos para a economia brasileira.
so we're
Isso
going to
me
have
traz a
these
minha
significant
segunda pergunta,
impacts.
que é talvez um pouco mais
And this goes to my
logística,
second
vamos dizer assim. O
question,
Brasil,
which is more logistical.
diferentemente de alguns
Brazil,
países do
different,
mundo,
which is different
tem
from
não
many
um, mas
countries in the
três
world, has
ministérios que
three
tratam, que são
ministries
dedicados a
that are
questões
dedicated
econômicas.
to
A
economic
Fazenda, o
questions,
Desenvolvimento
the
Econômico e o Planejamento e
finance,
Orçamento.
economic
Dentro
development,
desse
and
cenário
budget
atual,
and
mas
planning.
também
Within this
futuro, qual
scenario,
que é a
and also for
importância
the
de um
future,
ministério
what's the
focado no
importance
orçamento
of
e
a
o
ministry
planejamento
that's
do país,
focused on
e que é tão
budget
único
and
para o Brasil?
planning, which
O
is a
Brasil é um
singular
país de
situation in
dimensão
Brazil?
continental, como é o
Brazil
caso
is a
dos Estados
continental
Unidos,
sized country
só que
like
nós temos
the
desafios
United
muito
States,
maiores.
but we have
Nós
so
ainda
many more
temos muito que
challenges,
avançar.
really. We have
Nós
a lot
temos
to
3
do.
ministérios na
We have
equipe
we have
econômica, na área econômica, com
three
atribuições
ministries
muito
in the economic
diversas.
area with
Somos
different
coordenados pelo Ministério da Fazenda, mas
functions,
temos
and
autonomia
we
e
have a lot of the
atribuições
same
diferentes.
functions, of
Posso
course,
falar um
but many
pouquinho
different
sobre o
ones as
Ministério
well.
do
Let me
Planejamento e
talk a little
Orçamento. Eu
bit about
brinco e
the
faço uma
budget and
brincadeira sempre
planning
que eu falo assim, que nós temos duas
role.
esteiras, ou
We have two
um caminho com
tracks, I
duas
might
vias.
say, or we
Eu
have
tenho o
one
Ministério do
road
Orçamento, que é o
with two
Ministério do
branches.
presente,
I have
né?
the
Do hoje,
the
dia a
Ministry of
dia, de que
Today,
forma
which is
gastar
budget,
bem
which
o
is the
dinheiro
daily
arrecadado do povo
task, which
brasileiro,
is
garantindo
to
eficiência,
invest
qualidade. O Brasil gasta
the
muito e
money
gasta mal.
that we
Eu
have at
diria até
hand.
que
We
gasta
spend a lot and we
entre
spend it
gastar
poorly,
muito não é o
unfortunately.
problema
And
é gastar
spending a
mal,
lot
né?
isn't the
Quando se
problem.
gasta
It's
muito com
spending it
educação
money
e com
poorly.
educação pública
When you spend on public
e esse
education
gasto
in an
de
efficient way,
qualidade, ele vira um
that's a
investimento.
quality
O
spending, and
problema é
it
que o
turns into
Brasil
good
gasta
investment.
mal porque não
But the
tem
problem is
cultura
that
de
Brazil
planejar.
um,
Então, ao mesmo tempo que nós temos o
spends
Ministério do
poorly because
Orçamento, que é o
there's no
Ministério do hoje,
proper
do agora,
culture
do
of
imediato,
spending.
foi recriado
And
neste governo,
so we
depois de 4
recreated in
anos
this
sem
government
o
after 4
Ministério do
years the
Planejamento. E nós estamos
Ministry of
tentando
Planning,
mudar
and
essa
we're trying to
cultura
change this culture
de não se
of
ter
not
cultura de
having
planejar no
a
Brasil. Em
culture
relação ao
of
Ministério do
planning in
Orçamento, eu
Brazil.
gostaria apenas de
And in
dizer
terms of
que para garantir a
planning
previsibilidade
again,
e
and
garantir
to
com que o
guarantee
Brasil não
a
gaste mais do que
predictability and that
arrecada,
we not
nós
spend
estamos, temos
more
uma
than we
secretaria específica de
tax.
avaliação
We
de
have a
políticas públicas que foi
secretariat
criada
of
recentemente,
evaluation of public
avaliando
policies
ex
that
ante,
evaluate
anteriormente,
um,
novas políticas públicas
beforehand
e
new
analisando a
public
eficiência e
policies
eficácia de
and
políticas públicas velhas de 10,
analyzing
20 anos
the
atrás. É o
prior
nosso, entre
public
aspas, para
policies.
resumir e encerrar,
That's
speed review. Não é fácil num país
the
com
speedy
tantos
review.
desafios, não é fácil num
It's
governo
not
de frente
uh,
ampla, onde eu sou
it's
mais
not easy
fiscalista
in
e
terms
o
of our government.
governo como um todo mais
We
desenvolvimentista, mas está chegando
um,
a hora e eles
are
têm essa consciência eficiência da
focus
revisão
on
estrutural.
these
Na
tasks.
parte do
And as
planejamento,
far as planning,
visar a médio e longo
it's
prazo.
looking
Eu
to
cito
the
apenas
medium and
3
long term.
ações fundamentais,
And there are
mas muito
three
importantes, ou pelo
basic
menos 2 em
tasks
função do tempo.
um,
Nós
in
fizemos o
terms of this
planejamento de
work.
médio
We
prazo, que é
have
o
the
PPA,
medium-term
rodando todo o país e
planning
ouvindo do Brasil. Que
throughout the
Brasil
country.
vocês querem
What
para os
kind of,
próximos
we asked
4
our
anos?
citizens, what kind
E
of country do you
surpreendendo a
have in the
resposta do
next
povo
4
brasileiro.
years?
Na
And the
transversalidade,
people
a
answer in a
ação
very
que mais
curious
teve
way.
voto pelas redes
What
sociais,
people
pelo menos
want
na
most
internet,
of
foi:
what we hear
queremos
through the
ações de
internet is
combate à
that we
mudança
have
climática
actions
no mundo, no
that
Brasil e no mundo. E na
require
transversalidade
combating
prevaleceu, onde
climate
está a
change
mulher e
throughout
a
the world,
criança no orçamento
and
brasileiro,
also
onde está a igualdade
considerations of
racial no orçamento
um,
brasileiro, onde
racial
está que
equality
são as
and
transversalidades, os
the
povos
role of
originários
women
no
and
orçamento
children
brasileiro, chegando no final, que são 6,
in
onde
budget
está a
planning
questão da
and the
sustentabilidade do meio
question of
ambiente. Ou seja,
sustainability
quando se pergunta de
and
forma correta
climate
para a
change.
população, ela
So when
sabe
we
quais são as
ask
suas
the
necessidades, quais são
population,
os seus
what are
anseios.
your
E eu
needs
não posso
and what are
deixar
your
essa
anxieties,
sexta-feira a
they
resposta
always
que eu vou
touch
dar, a
on
mais longa de todas as perguntas, eu vou
these
ser bem
issues.
objetiva nas
I'm going to be
próximas,
very
Valentina, de dizer que o nosso
objective and
maior
say
desafio, e
our
eu
greatest
orgulho que
challenge,
tem uma equipe
and
maravilhosa
I'm
e tem
very
alguns
proud to
dos
say that we
meus
have a great team that
assessores
works
nos
on this,
acompanhando,
and
de dizer que o Brasil, pela
to
primeira
say
vez na
that
sua
Brazil, for
história,
the
vai
first
fazer um
time in its
planejamento de
history,
longo prazo,
is
que é a
going to do
Estratégia Brasil 2050, que a gente
a
pode falar
strategy,
no fechamento, não
2050
há problema,
strategy, which is a
mas é que
long-term
Brasil o
strategy,
Brasil quer para os próximos
that
25
this is
anos,
what
já
Brazil
com
wants for the
recorte.
next
Onde
25
queremos
years,
estar em
where we want to
2030,
go,
em
where we want to
2040
be in
e em
2030, in
2050. E
2040, and
tendo como foco
2050.
o
And
desenvolvimento
our focus
inclusivo,
is
não deixando
inclusive
ninguém
development
para trás,
without
com
leaving anyone behind,
responsabilidade
with
fiscal, mas
through fiscal
num ambiente
responsibility and an
sustentável
environment that's
ambientalmente falando.
sustainable
Então,
from the
estou muito
environmental point
otimista,
of view.
inclusive,
And I'm
nesta
very
estratégia, porque ela
optimistic
será
as to this
apresentada já
strategy,
na
and it's going to be
COP30, o ano que
presented
vem,
in
pelo presidente Lula
COP30
para os
next year
brasileiros e
by
para o mundo.
President Lula
Eu acho que é muito
before the
importante, não
world
se
and the
preocupe
Brazilian
com o
people.
tempo,
It's
a gente
very
vai controlando aqui,
important.
mas
Don't worry about the
pensar
time,
nesse
but
processo
it's
tão
important to think
consultivo
about this
com a
process. This
população
is a
brasileira como um
consultative one
todo
with the
nessa questão
Brazilian
de
population
planejamento, né?
as far
Acho
as
que isso
planning.
vem ao
And
acaso de ser
this
mencionado e
should
de
be
entender
mentioned.
também, não só
And we
através do
should also
Ministério do
say that
Orçamento, mas
through
através do
your
governo brasileiro
ministry
como um
and the
todo,
Brazilian
de como
government as a
essas
whole,
respostas vão ser, então,
how these
dadas para a população,
responses
né?
are going to
E
be
isso vem no
presented to the
planejamento em si.
population and
Acho
how
que eu
it's going to
fico
be
feliz também
incorporated in
de
the planning.
poder ter
And
recebido
I'm
aqui no
happy to
Atlântica
have
Council
received
alguns
here
dos
at the
seus
Atlantic
secretários, a
Council some
secretária
of your
Renata Amaral, o secretário
secretaries,
Sérgio Filtro também,
Amaral,
que contou
Sérgio,
para a gente um
and
pouco
who also told
sobre
us a bit about
esse novo modo
this new
de medir o
method
sucesso de políticas
of
públicas que eu acho que é muito
measuring the success
relevante.
of
E
public
eu acho que entra
policies.
também na minha
And
próxima pergunta, que
also in
também olha um
my
pouco
next
mais para o
question,
planejamento,
I
que
can
é o
see
fato
that
de que
there's
atrair e
also about
estimular
planning.
investimentos
Um,
estrangeiros é
there's a
crucial
question
para o
of
crescimento econômico
stimulating
do
foreign
Brasil e
investment,
algo que a
which is
gente tem
important for the growth of
visto
Brazil.
ser
And
discutido
we've
muito
seen
em relação ao Brasil. Já vimos que os números de
that
investimento
the
também estão superando
numbers
as
are
previsões
going
para
beyond
este ano,
expectations in
mas no
terms of
nível
foreign investment.
estrutural, o
But as
governo
far
também
as the
reconhece que o peso de
structural
investimento
perspective,
na
the
economia
weight of
total ainda
investment
está
in the
abaixo dos
total
números
economy is still
médios para
below
mercados
that
emergentes.
of
Ministra,
the
quais os
average of
incentivos o
emerging
governo está
markets.
implementando para
What are the
criar um
incentives that
clima
the
de
government's
investimento
implementing
mais
to
favorável?
create
E aí
a
acho que a
more
gente já
favorable
mencionou a própria
investment
reforma
environment?
tributária como
You've
um
talked
desses
about tax
incentivos.
reform as one of
Muito
these
bem.
incentives
Bom,
already.
a gente pode dizer assim que a
Well,
formação
we can
bruta do
say
capital
that
fixo
the
está crescendo
that
acima da
gross capital
expectativa. Há
formation
uma
is
previsão
going
do Banco
beyond
Central que prevê um
what's
crescimento
expected.
de mais de
There's going to
5%
be
esse ano, o que é
more than
extremamente positivo.
5% growth
Significa
in this
que nós
area,
temos como
which
garantir
means that
infraestrutura
we're
para
able
os
to
novos
guarantee
investimentos.
infrastructures for
Mas
new
além de
investments.
todas essas
But
reformas
beyond these
estruturantes que
reforms, these
garantem o
structural
ambiente
reforms
de
that
segurança
guarantee
jurídica,
um,
previsibilidade, estabilidade
predictability,
e de medidas, por exemplo, mais
a strong judicial
microeconômicas, eu
structure,
acabei
and
esquecendo de
on the
citar, mas tem, por
microeconomic
exemplo, a
level, I
autonomia do
should have
Banco Central,
mentioned the
que foi
autonomy
aprovada quando eu
of the
estava no
central
Senado
bank,
Federal
which was
recentemente, entre
approved when I
outras
was in
coisas.
the
É
federal
importante
Senate.
dizer que nós
It's also
sabemos que nós
important to
temos
say
uma
that we know
oportunidade
that we
numa
have an
política de
opportunity
transição ecológica.
through
O
an
Brasil tem a
ecological
oportunidade de transformar, isso não
policy.
é
We can
custo, isso é
this isn't a cost.
oportunidade,
This
de
means
transformar o
opportunity
nosso
of
ativo.
transforming
Nós temos a maior
our
floresta
assets.
tropical do mundo,
In
uma,
terms of the largest forest
uma
in the world,
condição de avançar na
we have
bioeconomia, na
the
economia circular,
opportunity
né? Nós
to
estamos falando de transição
advance as far as
energética,
economy, ecological transition. There's many resources available so that we can transform our transport freights, our transport resources in accordance with the new demands. and we have we can differentiate the tax system in order to accommodate these demands. And I'm not going to, the Minister of Finance is here in Washington tomorrow. He's going to be inaugurating the new platform, a new digital platform, so that everyone can understand this new strategic plan of ecological change that's sustainable and it takes into account the bioeconomy, the circular economy, and we can talk hours about this issue and everything that's being managed and thought about and the number of projects that are being considered in the National Congress. But I think that this is what's most important. I'm not I think we should talk about the challenges as well. We have huge challenges when we talk about investments. We're trying to eliminate bureaucracy. We're opening the doors to investment. We're looking for partnerships, private, public partnerships. But we have to do a lot more. We have to do our homework. The great challenge we have is that we're growing. We have inflation under control, but we have a great deal of costs in terms of interest rates. We have to, we're going to hand over to Lula the measures for containing costs and so that we can guarantee the sustainability of public debts and lower interest rates and have an environment, a more attractive environment for investments. You've mentioned the issue of climate and sustainability, and I want to mention Washington and the world. Brazil is among the most important economies in the world. It's a very important actor in global discussions, and the G20 will be hosted there, and the BRICS and COP30. Brazil is at the center of issues of great importance and magnitude in terms of financing, climate financing, and the fact that Brazil's a vanguard and the leader in these agendas of sustainable development. How have you advanced this domestically and internationally, and how will there be space for greater cooperation internationally for sustainable development and for climate development in Brazil and throughout the world? You answered your question to a certain extent. I also said a lot about the domestic situation of our country, but you're talking here about of our international partners. And yes, we understand the responsibility that we have in in having the largest forests in the world. And the question of deforestation is also something that's very real to us. The fires, the deforestation, and we have our goals in mind by 2030 of zero illegal deforestation. And we're going to change this picture so that the Amazon can this will become an asset for us, these forests, and we can manage CO2 emissions through the forests, and this will all these plans will all be public through social media. But we can't do this alone. We need partners. We need the multilateral banks, which are excellent partners. The World Bank has a partnership with us, the Inter-American Development Bank, through Amazonia Viva. The Atlantic Council is also a great partner for us around this issue of the environment. And so it doesn't involve only financial capital. We need expertise. We need know-how. We need technology. We need the technology that the United States has at hand, satellite monitoring, to go inside the Amazon and see what's happening in terms of illegal settlements. So what we hope for and what President Lula, G20, in the context of the G20 is doing in terms of building a sustainable world mentions three dimensions, and one is the agenda of sustainability, of environmental sustainability. That's going to be one of the a major focus. And then we have COP30 in the Amazon, and we're going to be meeting these challenges, and you're going to have to learn about these issues, dealing with the mosquitoes and the heat, but it's going to happen there. And remember, there are 25 million Brazilians who live in the region who depend on sustainability. While the forest and the as long as a an exploited forest is worth more than a standing forest, we're in trouble. So we have the conditions, we have the wherewithal to change the situation. And maybe you have further questions during the next 7 minutes, and we can talk more about also partnerships with other countries in South America. You mentioned about 3 or 4 more questions that I have, but we have very little time, so I'm going to put together 2 questions. I'm going to join 2 questions. We're here in Washington, D.C. this week, where ministers and the governors of central banks are meeting during the annual meetings of the IMF and the World Bank. And these multilateral meetings are very important for the development, the economic development of countries around the world. How has Brazil prioritized partnerships with these organizations? And we're in Washington, where we're having elections in Washington in November. How can Brazil and the United States deepen their relationships, their bilateral relationship beyond the economic realm? I'm sure that the partnership, the strategic partnership that Brazil has with Washington will continue firm and strong. We we increased our exports to the United States, and we're always open to imports from the United States for those products that we don't have, that we don't produce. So it's a two-way street. The United States is a strategic partner for Brazil, not only for Brazil, but for all of Latin America. It's the greatest world power. And what we expect from the next president is that this partnership continue and that it continue respecting the objectives of sustainability. We need U.S. know-how. We need technology and whatever the U.S. has to offer us through and also through multilateral organisms. And I have to be very careful because the elections are upon us, and we we have a package of projects to strengthen our partnerships. In this context, we have a project in my ministry, which is the roots of integration in South America, which besides trying to integrate South America and to shorten our distances, it has the ability to narrow distances between Brazil and countries in South America, and also with the west coast of the United States. So there's this new vision of partnership between Brazil and the United States. And I think this you touched on my next question, which is about integration, economic integration, and regional integration. We're talking about Latin America and the Caribbean, and projects that are looking to this integration and this greater closeness between the United States and Latin America. After this was made clear after we saw a very important photograph, very interesting photograph. There was a meeting between President Lula and all of the heads of state of Latin America, with the exception of the head of state of Peru, who sent her representative. Everyone was present, from the right, from the left, the extreme right, extreme left governments that have had very different ideologies. And despite these different ideological differences, there was a consensus in terms of departing from this cycle, this vicious cycle of inequality. and they saw the need for regional integration. The Canada, United States, and Mexico, North America, I don't want to touch on, I'm going to touch on round numbers. They say that it's around 40% integration. First, you buy through North America, and then you import from outside of the region. In Asia, it's around 56% integration. In Europe, there's a European commerce of 68% thereabouts. And why? Because of proximity, logistics. It's more efficient. It's an opportunity cost if you don't do so. When you look at South America, Latin America, it's not even 18% this degree of integration. So we have this potential for competition, for integration that involves import-export tourism that can diminish inequalities, generate jobs, and allows us to allows us sustainable development. We don't have time to talk about touch on everything, but I'm very optimistic because we have many partnerships, IMF, World Bank. We have a number of partners to enable us to reach this objective. We have billions of dollars for countries. We don't need these resources because we have budgeted for the next 3 years works planned for this new route. And we have the condition to develop one arm for each of these routes from north to the southern point of South America so that we can connect the countries to Asia and to the west coast of the United States by the end of President Lula's term. You answered my last question, and talking about the connection with the World Bank, because that's very much talked about here in this week, and we see these actions taking place and the decisions being made and the differences that are being made. And thank you very much. We want to bring you back to the Atlantic Council because there are many questions that are still to be answered, but thank you so much for answering all of my questions, and I hope you're back soon. Thank you very much. I thank you.